9 out of the 10 teams brought upgrades to this weekend's British Grand Prix in Silverstone, but one stood out above the rest. McLaren, in the space of 10 races, have gone from zero to hero and look like a completely new team, which is kind of a miracle. It's the most fascinating story, as whilst other teams are struggling to improve, how have the Papaya team managed to save their season and picked up a second and fourth place finish in Silverstone? They've changed their staff, fixed their driver problem, brought upgrades, and everything seems to be working out perfectly for new team boss Andrea Stella, to the point where this might just be too good to be true. But before we talk about that, let's talk about how they managed to get here. Now, there are quite a few pieces to this puzzle, so I'm going to break it up into 3 parts: the team, the drivers, and the car, all of which have changed dramatically since the start of the season in Bahrain. And what a start to the season it was, by the way. The car was absolutely dreadful and was nowhere near where anybody expected it to be coming into a brand new season after a long winter break. It was a surprise to the Formula 1 fan base, but it wasn't much of a surprise to the new team boss Andrea Stella, who admitted the team had missed the mark in terms of car development. He even said, "Last year we had some clear objectives in terms of the developments to do with the aerodynamic efficiency. The reality is most of these objectives have actually been met, but the objective in terms of aerodynamic efficiency of the car is one where we are still shy of what was our target." Now, obviously, Formula 1 is a team sport, and there are thousands of people and moving parts that have to come together to put the car on track. However, the lack of understanding in terms of the car's development direction seemed to fall on then technical director James Key, who was removed from the team by Zak Brown and Andrea Stella after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which, to be fair, was another tough weekend for the McLaren team. The team was still running effectively a B-spec MCL60 as the upgrades were still waiting to be completed, and at the time they said these upgrades may not appear until the Azerbaijan Grand Prix at the end of April, but in reality, although there was a floor upgrade in Baku, the core aerodynamic upgrades didn't come into fruition until Austria, which Lando said was the first decent upgrade on the car. So as I was saying, McLaren actually used this time to revise its technical structure and move away from one single technical director, and instead replace James Key with 3 separate roles. Peter Prodromo became the technical director for aerodynamics, Neil Holdy was internally promoted to technical director for engineering and design, and David Sanchez will actually return to McLaren after a decade at Ferrari next January as technical director for car concept and performance. Although Andrea Stella himself had only become team principal in December, just 3 months later, he had made a massive change to the inner workings of the McLaren setup, and it seems like it's working. So far this season, the entire setup looks reinvigorated for the future. This was then doubly helped by the fact that the team also finally completed construction of their new simulator and wind tunnel. Believe it or not, the team was still using its very first Formula 1 simulator and relying on Toyota's wind tunnel in Cologne. Now, I know that the wind tunnel hasn't yet had any effect on the car this season and won't have too much of an effect until 2024 realistically, but just having it there completed at the factory, knowing that the team is moving in the right direction in terms of infrastructure, gives a massive confidence boost to the team and will surely help the team this season to push on and seek improvements ready for that future. Zak Brown even said himself, I'm very excited that over the next couple of years, I feel we'll have everything in place to be fighting at the front. Which also gives a huge amount of confidence to the drivers looking at how this season has progressed. Again, if we go all the way back to Bahrain, there were reports that Lando Norris was so annoyed with the MCL60 that he punched a wall in the garage purely through frustration. And although completely out of character, it was understandable. Norris registered fewer laps than any other individual driver, aside from Felipe Drugovich, who was a stand-in. The team had completed the fewest laps in comparison to the other 9, and Lando's lap times were outside of the top 10 for the entirety of testing. However, even with these frustrations, Norris has continued to outperform that McLaren car, as we've seen from him over the last few seasons, which has allowed a platform for the team to build upon. Lando, now being the team's most experienced driver, said it has been the hardest and toughest start to a Formula 1 season he's had, but he's also relishing the challenge of improving the car and chasing the rewards that come with success. Which actually leads me to thinking about the other side of the garage, where I feel like the team's decision to swoop and sign Oscar Piastri to replace Daniel Ricciardo this season is finally looking to come good. It was a huge risk that the team had to take. You have to remember that Danny Ric was contracted at McLaren for the 2023 season, which means McLaren spent millions on making sure he wasn't driving for the team this year, whilst also gambling on a rookie replacement. But as Andrea Stella said, ultimately, when it comes to past decisions, we look at the present. In terms of the present, we have two strong drivers, and this puts us in a strong position for the present, but above all for the future. And he's able to say that because Oscar's progression this season, alongside the progression of the car, has been incredible to witness, as on many occasions he's looked to be nearing the level of Lando Norris. And while Silverstone 2022 was one of Daniel Ricciardo's worst weekends whilst he was driving in Papaya, Piastri had one of his best, and the team's best for a while, nearly picking up a double podium finish. And let's face it should have been a double podium finish. I know Ricciardo fans will hate me for saying this, but I think having Oscar in the team whilst they went through that turbulent start to the season was much better for team morale. Ricciardo, let's face it, would have been incredibly negative, and rightly so. He's looking to get back towards the top of the grid, whilst Oscar was incredibly calm, and being a rookie had other things on his mind too, beyond just the pure performance level of the car. This just gives the team a little room to breathe whilst developing the car, as there's less expectation on them from Piastri and Piastri's fan base, alongside the fact that Piastri has been much closer to Norris in comparison to Ricciardo. Like, take this weekend for example, in qualifying the gap was only 0.131 seconds, something that Ricciardo at times would have dreamed of. Which now means both drivers seem rejuvenated and settled in just as the car has started to come good, allowing them both to take advantage of this new competitive performance. Which has come about thanks to some phenomenal development and upgrade packages that, had they had earlier, would have made this season look a lot nicer. Don't get me wrong, the car is still developing, but it's clear something really clicked this weekend. Both drivers discussed the upgrades from their perspective in Silverstone. Oscar was incredibly descriptive, saying, "The car doesn't feel too much different, it's just faster." Thanks, Oscar. Whereas Lando did actually give a little more insight, saying the upgrade has definitely added load to the car. It's clear we've improved. That's very, very evident. High speed, like here, we've made the car more efficient, and the high speed has always been one of our strengths anyway. Overall, our speed has taken a step forward. And looking at the last few races, that makes perfect sense. Barcelona sees a lot of high-speed corners, now that the final chicane has been removed in particular, and Lando's qualifying in Spain was amazing. Had he not come into contact with Lewis Hamilton at the start, maybe we could have seen a really high-scoring performance from him. He did make up for that in Austria though, which is also a fairly high-speed track when it comes to cornering. Norris qualified well again, but Austria's race pace was much better than Barcelona's, and in the words of Stella, the upgrades were absolutely fundamental in terms of this improvement. Norris caught, passed and pulled away from Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, leaving the Silver Arrows driver to look at the McLaren with a little bit of jealousy this weekend. Lewis Hamilton said McLaren's sensational qualifying performance this weekend is a wake-up call to the Mercedes team, as the McLaren's upgrades mean if you put it alongside a Red Bull, it looks very similar down the side, and it's working, as the McLaren team had another weekend where they took a leap in the right direction, as both cars out-qualified both Mercedes, and they should have finished ahead of the Mercedes too. Lewis Hamilton couldn't even catch Lando Norris on fresh soft tyres. The crazy thing is, there's still more to come. Of the upgrades planned before the summer break, 50% were applied to Norris's car in Austria, with another 25% this weekend, and the final 25% still to come in Hungary, whilst Piastri is lagging just behind Norris, so may not get the full new upgrade package until Spa. The team behind the scenes looks set up for the future, the drivers in the car look like the perfect pair, and the car is just getting quicker and quicker. Nothing could go wrong. Well, just to temper some of this positivity, it does have to be said that the tracks recently do flatter McLaren's fundamental philosophy. Andrea pointed out that there's definitely a pattern between Silverstone and Barcelona. High-speed corners, cool conditions, soft tyres, actually the same tyre, the C3. Our car likes these conditions. The conditions have come to our favour, but there is some contribution coming from the improvements we made to the car. We can measure them in terms of the downforce and can see in some of the low speed, we are decently competitive there now. It's in that wording, decently competitive, where the real test lies. Lando, whilst positive, said the weaknesses are still the same. Fast-flowing tracks are good for us, and we've had a couple. I don't want to look forward to the bad races, but there's going to be a couple, because there's definitely tracks that we know we're going to struggle more at. And it always seems to come back to the weird characteristics of the McLaren's fundamentals. It's something that Daniel Ricciardo, one of the best drivers of the last generation, couldn't even get his head around after 40 races with the team. The car is just incredibly inconsistent in the corners. The way in which you approach the entry, hit the brakes and steer the car seems to follow very little pattern and has to be figured out by the drivers every weekend. Norris said it's like 70-30. 70-30, 70% not fixed, 30% fixed, just by making the car quicker, adding load and having better performance. But will those fundamentals in the McLaren's design be the thing that once again stops them from taking that step required to being a consistent podium challenging team in the future? I'd absolutely love to know your thoughts in the comments. Like, what do you think McLaren's ceiling is now that they have the new facilities and the new design team in place? Where are they aiming over the next few years? And if you've enjoyed this video, I've linked another one that I think you'll like on the end card. So click that link and I'll see you over there.